So moving into the election of 1892, with knowing that about populism, the Populist Party is one of the only third parties in American history to actually get a significant amount of electoral votes and popular vote. Not so much that they're going to win, but enough to make it significant. Nominations we have Grover Cleveland, who we had seen before 4 years earlier for the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, Benjamin Harrison, the current president, and then the Populist Party nominates James Weaver, and remember they're running on the Omaha platform. So Cleveland will win this whole election. A close race against Harrison in a sense, because Cleveland had been popular 4 years earlier, but Harrison, his presidency was wrought with a lot of issues, and so Cleveland will win by that margin. But what is more important, even though the Populists didn't win, they gained 1 million popular votes and 22 electoral votes, mostly from Kansas, Colorado, Idaho, and Nevada, which is just uncommon, not regular in U.S. history for a third party to do that well. They will elect 3 governors, 5 senators, 10 representatives, and a whole host of local officials, mostly in those western and Midwestern states, Kansas, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, Nebraska, Wyoming, those sort of places. And keep in mind that a lot of these places gave women the right to vote as well. Because when you're settling out there, and it's mostly small towns, I mean, things are mostly equal. So those women fighting for the right to vote out there will get that in many of those Western states long before women will have the right to vote nationally. Look at Cleveland's second term in office, which is just kind of a disaster because of another panic that's coming. But one of my favorite Cleveland quotes was right before he left his first term in office, when Benjamin Harrison had won. He said, "Now, Jerry," to his butler, "I want you to take good care of all the furniture and ornaments in the house, for I want to find everything just as it is now when we come back again 4 years from today." And he was actually right about that. He predicted that. So he is the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. He was president for 4 years, then Benjamin Harrison was president for 4 years, and then he will be president again. Next time is no bueno for him. Cleveland's entire second term is 1892 all the way to 1896-ish. There will be a panic, and he just has to live through it, and it's going to make him extremely unpopular. It's going to be one of the worst depressions of the century, and employment will get up to 20%. So why is there a panic this time? Much like all the other times, Americans never learn over speculation. That is when these railroad companies and these banks give out money to railroad companies and to farmers, loaning it, hoping to make a lot of money, hoping they're loaning to the right person, but many of these people default on their loans and don't pay it back. And so banks are being really risky with giving out loans. We also have stock market downturn, reduce in trade because America is seen as like this wealthy nation, and they're switching to a gold and silver standard, and some countries don't like that, so they reduce their trade. They call in loans from American banks that the banks have to pay out on. And then we have an agricultural depression where farmers are growing too much, and since there's a surplus, they sell it for less and they're making less money. And so those are kind of the reasons behind this very long panic. One issue of the panic is, remember, America's money is still on the gold standard. It needs to be backed by gold or using gold or silver pieces to pay for things. And so the gold reserves have dwindled down quite a bit, so much so that they are below this like healthy, we need this much gold to back our money in America, in our U.S. Treasury, like way below that level. So the government had been paying out more for silver than it received for gold, so coining out silver and giving it out, but those bank notes that need to be paid, or legal tender notes that need to be paid in gold, are just not being paid back. And so Cleveland, seeing that this is an issue, he repeals the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which he actually liked, but he saw the economy dipping down and down and down because the government was buying all this silver, but its gold was just being sent out. And so the U.S. Treasury just doesn't have enough to back what paper money there is. So what is the solution? We consult the rich people in the country. So J.P. Morgan, major financier and industrialist during this time period, he has tons of gold. And so the government borrows gold from JP Morgan is the short way of putting it. It sounds ridiculous that our government gets so broke that they have to make a deal with a rich guy in our country, but that's kind of what happens if we boil it down that small. So the gold reserve had sunk from where it should be at 350 million all the way down to 41 million of gold in the U.S. Treasury coffers to back up money, which is bad. So the U.S. was then in danger of going off the gold standard, and they were afraid that going off the gold standard would make money volatile and unreliable, and international trade would be crippled, and so they act quickly to do something. So Cleveland persuaded JP Morgan and other bankers, not just him, but mostly him because he has a lot of money, to lend the government $65 million in gold, and that they would pay it back plus 7 million more. Like they would make JP Morgan and all these bankers would make 70 million eventually, just not right now. So like a commission kind of. And so these bankers kind of make a concession. They obtain some of the gold abroad, get it out of other countries in the United States, send it to the Treasury, and we will see confidence in the nation's finances restore. But we see JP Morgan and all his buddies making money off of the US government, and that gives everyone kind of a bad taste in their mouth about government and business being in cahoots with each other, like bad publicity in a sense. Moving on to the election of 1896, sorry, I'm flying through this stuff. We will see that this populist party kind of dies out already. They had their one good year, 1892, and now they've kind of fizzled out in a sense. But we will get to why they are still important even to this day later on. Is running for president. We have William McKinley. William McKinley is a congressman from Ohio and Republican nominee for president. He is goes with the Republican gold standard platform, but also kind of brings in this idea of bimetallism. And bimetallism is the idea of backing our money with gold and silver. And the true idea of bimetallism is that everyone in the world would back their money with gold and silver, but that's just not going to happen and everybody knows it kind of idea. Republicans are also very for the protective tariff. On the other side, for the Democrats, we have William Jennings Bryan. He is a Democratic nominee, and he is just not a fan of Cleveland, which is why he's running. He believes that silver should be coined and used as currency, not so much to back up money, but more as like actual in coins. And he kind of courts the populist party. Like populist party people kind of flock to William Jennings Bryan because he has some of those ideas that the populist party likes. And so in a sense, he ends up overshadowing the populist party and kicking them out of national elections, because those people that would support him if he were a populist would still support him if he were a Democrat. And so he ran as a Democratic a Democratic nominee, sorry. He sees himself, he's from Nebraska. He was a great speaker. He saw himself as like a champion of the poor. He had a lot of heart and passion, but he just wasn't well educated, wasn't very intellectually bright like William McKinley. And so one of the biggest moments we see of William Jennings Bryan, one of the reasons that the silver versus gold, coin versus backing money, hard money versus soft money issue even comes to play is because he, William Jennings Bryan, who's very passionate, kind of brings it to the forefront. And he does so very prominently at the Democratic Convention in Chicago, where he gives the Cross of Gold speech. And here's a little bit from it. You come to us and tell us that the cities are in favor of the gold standard. We reply that the great cities rest upon our broad and fertile prairies. So there he's saying that they want the gold standard. Well, listen to us, because their great cities rest upon us as farmers. Burn down your cities and leave our farms, and your cities will spring up again as if by magic. But destroy our farms, and the grass will grow in the streets of every city in the country. Having behind us the producing masses of the nation, we will answer their demands for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. So essentially saying that America depends on us, the farmers, on us, the poor people, and your politics, your idea of gold standard, bimetallism, gold silver standard, they need to rely upon what the regular people want. You shall not crucify us upon a cross of gold. And that is just like, it plays to people's religious sentiments of the day. It plays to people's hard money versus soft money issue. A fantastic orator. William Jennings Bryan did a great job. So McKinley wins, even though William Jennings Bryan was very popular in this Democratic platform of unlimited coinage of silver, 16 ounces of silver to every 1 ounce of gold, and how Bryan kind of ignored the populace in a sense. He didn't acknowledge the populist nomination, and the fact that the Populist Party is kind of dying out kind of leads McKinley to win. And what's frustrating about that is McKinley never even left Ohio when he was campaigning. He didn't go around and make all these fancy speeches. He called it his front porch campaign. But when the Republicans win, it's mostly a loss for the farmers. That's who it's going to hurt the most. So the election of 1896, McKinley versus William Jennings Bryan, is often looked at like the Wizard of Oz. Like they draw ties between the two, and we don't know if L. Frank Baum actually meant to take the election and turn it into an analogy of the Wizard of Oz, but let's look at it like maybe he did. So Dorothy, if you remember the Wizard of Oz, she gets swept away in a tornado away from Kansas. She lands in the land of Oz. She has to make it to the wizard. She has to fight the Wicked Witch of the West, and eventually she wakes up and it was all a dream. Dorothy would be seen as the everyman of the West, the typical person from Kansas, likable, pure, untainted by the excesses of the world. In the book, they're silver slippers. In the movie, it's ruby slippers. But in the book, it's silver slippers, and those are seen as soft money. And, you know, in the movie, she finally realizes that the slippers have power. She clicks her heels and says, I want to go hit, there's no place like home, there's no place like home. Those are seen as soft money, silver, and like backed by, like that sort of thing. But no one knows like the power that soft money has, is kind of the idea. The yellow brick road, of course, would be the gold standard. The scarecrow would be seen as Midwestern farmers who are kind of seen as stupid. The scarecrow says, I don't have a brain, but by the end he realizes he actually does have a brain. So the Midwestern farmers seen as stupid, but actually they have wisdom. The Tin Man would be the person, the man exploited by the Wicked Witch of the East, and the Wicked Witch of the East would be the corporation. So the Tin Man would be the poor laborers in the cities. The city of Oz, Oz is an ounce. That's how we shorten it. So an ounce of silver or an ounce of gold. The Cowardly Lion is often seen as a metaphor for William Jennings Bryan. He has this big roar. He's passionate. He's larger than life, but he has no bite. He's a coward. Okay, the populace saw him as a coward because he didn't side with the Populist Party. The Flying Monkeys would be seen as the Plains Indians who were once free but now are subdued by the Wicked Witch of the West and those evil corporations. The water that kills the Wicked Witch of the West at the end is the idea of this drought will end for farmers. The actual drought and the like politics don't listen to us drought will end for farmers. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. The Wicked Witch of the West would be the frontier environment, the drought, the tornadoes, the locusts, the nastiness. And so all of these kind of come together in this analogy for the election of 1896 and how farmers had their chance and then it didn't really pan out. But let's talk about that. So overall, the legacy of populism in its time was a failure, but overall was actually a really good thing because those populist ideas, even if the party died out because the issue of should we include African Americans, should we not, the issues between South and West and William Jennings Bryan not recognizing them, all their platform, the Omaha platform, I told you was very modern. It will continue. The federal government will eventually regulate railroads so that they check the excesses of those people that are making money. The federal government will eventually put an income tax in place. The federal government will expand currency and silver and gold buying, those sort of things. Eventually, we will get direct election of senators initiative and referendum. We'll get a postal savings bank. We'll get an expanded postal service. So those populist ideas do continue even though the Populist Party died out. And that dream of farmers and the regular people rising up, essentially, even though it doesn't work in this era, it's very important to see that idea as like an American spirit and people exercising their democratic rights in a way. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Glad it only lasted 2 videos. Talk to you about it tomorrow.